This is the Assassin's Creed movie. Based on the video game series of the same name, it was released in 2016 and wasn't received particularly well. If you're unfamiliar, the game's story can pretty much be summed up as, throughout history, the Templars have been searching for the Apple of Eden, which is a source of power. The Assassins also, throughout history, have sworn to keep the apple hidden from the Templars, who want to use them to shape the world how they see fit. In the modern day, there aren't many assassins left. The Templars run a giant tech corporation called Abstergo and developed a piece of technology called the Animus, which allows you to relive ancestral genetic memory locked away in your DNA. They then kidnap the descendants of these assassins and force them to relive their ancestors' memories in order to locate where the apple, later apples, are hidden. In this particular story, Callum Lynch, played by Michael Fassbender, is a descendant of Aguilar, an assassin during the time of the Spanish Inquisition, and the last assassin to have this particular apple in their possession. Essentially, it's a really interesting story about order and perceived safety versus free will.
People no longer care about their civil liberties, they care about their standard of life. The modern world has outgrown notions like freedom. They're content to follow.
The threat remains while free will exists.
I've been a huge fan since the first game. When I saw that this film was coming out, I was cautiously optimistic, I think, like a lot of fans. It's directed by Justin Kurzel, who just before Assassin's Creed did an adaptation of Macbeth. And if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and just go watch it. It is stunning with top-notch performances, art direction, and cinematography by Adam Arkapaw, the same cinematographer for Assassin's Creed. I had actually written out an entire page of what I think could have gone wrong with the production of Assassin's Creed. You have these two historical epic movies with largely similar talent between the two, but at the end of the day, it would just be speculation, and I wasn't there. The bottom line is, after I watched the movie, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. There was something that grew on me over time, and I wanted to know if it could be improved. After re-watching the film with the intent to edit, what I feel like was really holding this film back is a lot of the editing choices and a lack of motivation for the main character. Before I talk about my edit, I want to start with the positives of the film. I think it's really easy when talking about an edit like this to just focus on the negatives, but I believe that there is so much talent and care behind this film, specifically in the look and the art direction, which is really what drew me into this project in the first place. And I sincerely hope that the men and women behind the scenes are really proud of the work that they've done. Shooting on location and having massive sets, the beautiful looking weaponry that was created by Tim Wildgoose, the armor of the film, who just so happened to be a massive fan of the game series. Not to mention the costume design that, especially in the past sequences, are absolutely stunning. In an interview with the costume designer Sammy Differ, she said that they were very aware that what might look good in a game, a lot of the time just doesn't transfer well into reality. In spite of this, I think her and her team design costumes that look incredible and still have that distinct assassin silhouette. The detail put in by the costume department almost looks like they could be pieces hanging in a museum. In my opinion, the film from top to bottom just looks incredible. I also want to point out the caliber of actor on screen, like Michael Fassbender, Marion Cotillard, Brendan Gleeson, Jeremy Irons, Ariane Lebed, Charlotte Rampling, and the late Michael Kenneth Williams, just to name a few. Denis Menochet also gives probably what is my favorite monologue in the whole film. I actually really enjoy a lot of the performances here. One of my favorite things in film is when two characters are just trying to figure each other out. Pauses and meaningful glances as if there's almost a mental chess match being played. It's a risky move because to most people expecting a big popcorn summer movie, it might look like things are just moving too slowly, too boring, the camera holding too long, but I love it. Because there isn't a constant stream of dialogue and exposition being thrown at the audience, it forces the viewer to try and read between the lines. To me, it's more engaging and requires the audience to think, rather than having the film spoon-feed what the characters are thinking and feeling constantly. It increases the mystery of everybody's motives and keeps the main character and the audience in the dark, leading Cal to one of the best lines.
What the fuck is going on?
The fight choreography is also top-notch. Ben Cook, the stuntmaster who previously worked on the Bourne Ultimatum and Casino Royale, bringing a gritty and kinetic flow to the fights, trying to get as much as he could in camera. Now, how those fights are edited, I will come back to later. I also want to point out the tone of the story. It's very reminiscent of the first video game in the franchise, with the modern sequences being more psychologically driven and dialogue heavy, and the majority of the big budget action sequences being set in the past. It really feels like the filmmakers tried to mimic that feel and create a real grounded psychological story based in this world, which actually takes place simultaneously as the game story. The leader of this particular Templar group, Riken, played by Jeremy Irons, and the development of his harness animus tech being a separate unit from the Templar team we see in the early video games. There's even this really cool Easter egg in Assassin's Creed Origins. I think this works because you don't have to worry about offending fans of the game by not getting a detail right, just trying to retell the same story. It also gives newcomers not familiar with the source material a jumping on point to the franchise. I'm personally tired of seeing video game adaptations just trying to retell the same story for film or TV. As a fan of a particular game or book, I would much rather see a new, original tie-in story rather than a slightly different, often worse take on a story that I already know. I think it goes without saying that from here on out there will be spoilers. Since the deleted scenes that I used are very noisy and unfinished, I opted to use the Blu-ray 1080p version and not the 4K version. I would love to do a higher resolution revision in the future and do some upscaling work to the deleted scenes. But VFX work is just not my thing, and the work done in this edit is at best serviceable. I also used the original soundtrack to help cover up some of the cuts, and I also picked up the Into the Animus movie book to try and get some more insight into the production. My personal biggest issue with the film that I mentioned earlier, and one that a lot of people seem to share, is that Cal just doesn't have much motivation to help the assassins in the end. In the very beginning of the theatrical cut, after we see Aguilar take the creed, we see Cal as a child, discovering his father and his dead mother. The film's antagonist, Riken, is also there at the end of the scene. Jeremy Irons' character menacing, along with a bunch of other Templars, obviously having something to do with what just happened. In my opinion, it gives away too much right at the start of the film. Because Cal saw his father kill his mother, he's understandably not shy about not wanting anything to do with him.
Tell my father I'll see him in hell.
In one of the film's culminating moments, as a form of psychological manipulation, Riken tries to take advantage of Cal's hatred and shows him that his father has been at Abstergo this whole time. He's been kept in a room that houses ex-assassins that are suffering from the bleeding effect. This is where being in the Animus for too long against your will causes your brain to have difficulty differentiating between what's an ancestor's memory and what's reality. Cal confronts his father after all these years, and Cal's father explains,
"What you saw, I did."
You murdered her.
I took her life rather than have it stolen by that machine.
They had agreed to her dying to keep what she knew, the location of one of the Apples of Eden, out of the Templars' hands. It's really one of the better and more emotional scenes in the film, with Cal deciding to not take revenge on his father. This, however, ultimately goes nowhere, and nothing is really resolved between the two. Afterwards, Cal's father is then killed in that room during the big escape. Cal only decides to help the creed after seeing a memory of his mother repeating the creed. To me, this just wasn't satisfying, and there was actually a better ending to this arc that was filmed. In Inquisition, I moved the entire opening flashback sequence forward and split it into two parts. I think that the first half of the flashback sequence works much better in this scene between Sophia, played by Marion Cotillard, and Cal. Here, in one of those figure each other out scenes, we get Michael Fassbender, who does a great job of looking as if he's fighting between staying present in the conversation and being lost in thought. There is a perfect spot to start the flashback.
My old man killed my mother.
And how does that make you feel?
This is a perfect pause in the conversation for the audience to see what's going on in Cal's mind.
Like killing him.
Back in the sequence with the confrontation between Cal and his father, there's another perfect spot to put the second half of the flashback here.
I ought to have killed you. I couldn't.
When Cal's father is explaining the why behind what happened, the audience finds out at the same time as the main character that the threat of Riken and the Templars were the motivation behind that decision. This is where that better ending of the arc can be inserted. When Cal's father dies in this fight, from this shot and the security footage, it looks like he can still take care of himself. If you just remove this shot, you can imply that he fought his way out. In this added deleted scene, as the assassins are arming themselves for the big fight, we can see him grab a guillotine gun from the criminally underrated Assassin's Creed Unity. We then see him enter the big escape fight and start blasting. Denis Menochet's character enters and stabs him from behind before retreating to escape. At the end of the fight, instead of Cal monkeying up the Animus to try and catch a helicopter, we end on this new resolution between Cal and his father.
All that matters is what we leave behind.
In my opinion, this gives a much needed emotional boost to the film and is a great 1-2 punch after Cal realizes what his father was saying was true by seeing his mother. As I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy a lot of the fight choreography, especially in the past sequences. There was this awful trend of how action sequences were cut in the 2000s and 2010s, where they would cut between different angles constantly in order to artificially inject tension. In Assassin's Creed, we get this constant cutting, and it can almost be difficult to tell what's going on. But it's not only between different camera angles, but between Aguilar in the past and present-day Cal in the Animus. And when I say constant, it's almost headache-inducing levels of jarring. It's almost as if they really don't trust the audience to not forget about Cal. While cutting back and forth is incredibly jarring, I think a different kind of jarring can actually be a good thing. But if we allow the audience to really sink into these characters and sequences, almost to the point of forgetting we need to go back to the present, that when Cal is ripped from the Animus, it puts us in his shoes and rips us from the past as well. In my edit, I did my best to remove all the cuts to the modern day, except for this initial one, letting the audience know that yes, Cal is mirroring what his ancestor is doing. I also made a handful of minor tweaks of things that just kind of stuck out to me. To start with, I got rid of the modern music. Not to say that those songs are bad, to me they just don't fit. In a sci-fi mixed with historical epic, I would much rather hear the film's score with a mix between orchestral and electronic ambience than a contemporary song. This also goes for the song playing over the end credits. I went ahead and replaced it with Ezio's theme from Assassin's Creed 2, which was of course so good it kind of just became the de facto theme for the whole franchise. During those initial credits, I also included some awesome concept art from the film by Philippe Gallier. When the Animus breaks at the end and Cal is seeing visions of all of his ancestors, he sees one of his mother mentioned earlier. She's clearly looking up at him and mentions Cal by name.
You're not alone, Cal.
This seems to somehow try to blur the lines between a visual memory from the Animus and a ghost, maybe? Especially because in the theatrical cut, after his father dies, he shows up in the background. Since this is supposed to be rooted in a memory, it just doesn't make much sense since she died when Cal was a kid. And these two never talked about the Creed, with Cal only discovering the group's existence in this film. So I just removed her saying Cal, as well as the appearance of his young father. I just consider this a memory of his father speaking with her at some point about the Creed. During the final assassination, Cal, surprise, surprise, assassinates Riken, and then the lights go out. This seemed a little backwards to me, so I had the lights go out first, before the strike. Since we get this montage of other assassins having infiltrated this Templar meeting, I wish we had some footage of one of the other assassins throwing a breaker or doing anything else, but this will do.
Hide in plain sight. Let the people mask you such that you become one with the crowd. Do you remember? Because as I hear it, you chose to expose yourself, drawing attention before you'd struck.
In the middle of the film, Cal is suffering from the bleeding effect. Cal feels like he's starting to lose his mind, and the script calls for him to start singing as he's being loaded into the Animus. I don't feel like this really works because we never really see him snap out of it, or any of the other assassins that have gone into the Animus acting this way. Since we've already had sequences showing him entering the Animus, we just go from this line
You're up, Slugger.
to entering into the past, and I don't feel like we've lost much. A final bit that I want to talk about is Laura. There's almost an entire subplot with a girl named Laura, played by Octavia Selena Alexandru, that was completely cut, and a large portion of her story is actually included in the deleted scenes. She's the sort of adopted daughter of Marian's, who we find out is not only a descendant of assassins herself, but of Maria. Along with Cal's father, this subplot was clearly supposed to be another emotional focal point of the film, with her helping Cal to discover who he really is. Since the story was almost complete, I had it in my edit until very late, but it just wasn't quite finished. Although we get a lot, there just isn't a real conclusion to her story. She's not included in the Abstergo escape, and we don't quite know how she gets from point A to point B. It's a shame because I think Octavia gave a great performance, and I think we could have gotten a sort of Joel and Ellie subplot in the same vein as The Last of Us with The Big Escape. One of the scenes set in a diner after the final assassination made for a perfect mid-credits scene. At the end of the day, this edit was supposed to enhance the film, and I don't think I could have done that by adding an incomplete subplot. I've spent a lot of time with this film and the franchise as a whole. I can honestly say I had a lot of fun trying to improve this in some small way. Although I understand a lot of the criticisms about this film, I can see the amount of effort and talent behind it. In my opinion, the pieces are here to a better psychological action thriller and hopefully still exist in a vault or cutting room floor somewhere at Regency or 20th Century Studios. I would love to see Aguilar return again in some form or another. These characters like Benedicto and Maria, although on screen for such a small amount of time, seemed so realized and lived in with such strong character that they really drew me in. We essentially have Aguilar's entire assassin career from Oath to Death. And even if we somehow just get a more in-depth expansion of what happened during that time, I would be all for it.